A 16-year-old boy traveled to Detroit in 1879 after leaving his father's farm. The main modes of transportation at the time were trains and horse-drawn carriages. Additionally, having a car was considered a luxury available only to the wealthy. This young man, however, had higher goals. He founded a car company that would revolutionize the automotive industry just 35 years after moving to Detroit. Henry Ford was in charge, and his automaker quickly became the market leader. He went on to become one of the wealthiest men in American history at the time, with half of the cars in the world bearing his name. The history of Henry Ford's invention of mass production and how it helped make him famous is told here. On July 30, 1863, Henry Ford was born on his farmer's farm in Dearborn, Michigan. The entire family resided and worked on the farm that his father, William Ford, owned. Given that he was the oldest of 6 children, Henry was supposed to take over the family farm, but he disliked farming and thought it was a tedious and unappealing job. He made every effort to assist on the farm, but he had no love for it and only treasured the childhood memories of his mother, Mary Ford. Henry only made it through the 8th grade because he disliked going to school. He preferred to learn through self-discovery instead, and he was always fascinated by mechanics. He learned how to disassemble and reassemble a pocket watch his father gave him, when he was 12 years old. He started repairing watches for neighbors after developing a reputation as a watch repairman thanks to his newly discovered talent. When Henry saw a steam engine for the first time at the age of 13, his love for mechanics became even more fervent. During a field trip for students to a business in Detroit, he became obsessed with this new pastime over the following few years, and by the time he was 15, he had built his own steam engine. But when Henry's mother passed away from illness, his life changed. At the age of 16, against the advice of his father, he continued to test the farm due to his strong bond with her and her loss. Henry left the community in search of a fresh start and to get away from the traumatic memories connected to the farm. Young engineers were in high demand at the time because Detroit was quickly becoming an industrial city as a result of the invention of the steam engine. Henry reinvented himself in Detroit by devoting himself to the study of machines. He applied for a job at the Michigan Car Company, which makes streetcars, but was sadly let go 6 days later. Following some time without a job, Henry was hired as an apprentice at James Flower & Brothers machine shop, where he was paid $2.60 per week. This income, however, was insufficient to pay his rent. He therefore accepted a night job as a jeweler, cleaning and repairing watches for $3 per week, 6 nights a week. Despite the demands of his numerous jobs, Henry still managed to find time for research and machine experimentation. When Henry moved back to Michigan at the age of 19, he continued to hate farming, but made good use of his childhood fascination by spending most of his time tinkering with the equipment on his father's farm, which included a portable steam engine. Henry's mechanical prowess quickly became known throughout Michigan, and the district representative of the Schenectady, New York-based Westinghouse Engine Company eventually hired him. Henry was tasked with setting up and maintaining West steam tractor engines as he traveled throughout southern Michigan. At a New Year's Eve gathering in 1885, Henry met Clara Jane Bryant. They got engaged the following year. Henry's father gave him 40 acres of land as a wedding present, but Henry had other ideas for it than to use it for farming. Henry and Clara relocated to a modest flat in Detroit in 1891. Around this time, Henry came across a British magazine and learned about the German engineer Nicholas Otto's limited production gas engine. Due to its quicker startup than steam engines, this engine was significantly more efficient. The engine completed all of its internal combustion. The gasoline engine was becoming more and more popular in Europe, but few Americans had ever heard of it. Henry, however, was fortunate enough to come across someone who owned one in Detroit, and was immediately enthralled. Henry was determined to learn more despite not understanding how the engine operated and applied for a position as a night engineer for the Edison Illuminating Company, paying $40 a month. It used a steam engine as the largest electric company in Detroit to produce electricity for 1,000 homes. The chief engineer position suited Henry very well. He had plenty of time while the engine was running to study electricity. Edsel Bryan's Ford, Henry and Clara's lone child, was born in 1893. Henry received a promotion to chief engineer and a $100 weekly salary 3 months later. He was successful in building his first functional gasoline engine that same year. A significant step towards realizing his vision of a horseless. He finished his gasoline-powered experimental vehicle, known as the quadricycle, on June 4, 1896. The car, which was essentially 2 bicycles stacked on top of each other, was a success, but it had some drawbacks, like having only 2 gears and no cooling system. Henry made a number of modifications to the vehicle, such as installing a cooling system, and later sold it for $200, so that he could use the proceeds for another undertaking. Henry began building his second experimental vehicle in 1899 with assistance from Detroit and finished it in July. The new car was more substantial, heavier, and larger than the one from the previous 11 days. William Murphy, a wealthy timber merchant, joined Henry for a test drive in the brand new vehicle. William was eager to join Henry's business venture by the time the drive was over. And the Detroit Automobile Company was established on August 5, 1899. Henry was fired from his job as a result of these problems, but he didn't let that get him down. Instead, he saw it as an opportunity to start over more wisely. Henry then made the decision to concentrate on using the American sport of racing cars as a platform to show off his high-quality vehicles. A year later, Alexander Winton's cars from Cleveland were defeated by Ford's newly designed racing car. Investors gained the confidence they needed to support Henry when word spread about his 26-horsepower automobile. Once more, this resulted in Henry becoming the company's chief engineer, and the birth of the Ford Motor Company. Henry's investors, who wanted him to design passenger cars, became frustrated by his continued focus on racing cars and hired Henry Martin Leland to carry out their instructions. Henry announced his resignation with the words, "I resign," determined never again to submit to orders. Leland, on the other hand, built what is now known as Cadillac after adhering to the demands of the investors after Henry Ford's death. The organization now goes by the name Cadillac Motor Company. Together with Tom Cooper, a former racing cyclist, Henry continued to construct racing automobiles. They then produced a Ford 999 at 1904, which was driven by Barney Oldfield, a first-time driver, before outpacing Winton's vehicle. With these records and victories, Henry's new vehicle broke all American speed records, reaching a top speed of 91.4 miles per hour. Henry had made a name for himself as the best American racing car designer, and he was confident that whenever he was ready, investors would support him once more for his third business. In 1902, Henry Ford founded his third business, initially known as Ford and Malcolmson Limited, with the help of 11 investors and financial support from wealthy Detroit dealer Alexander Young Malcolmson. He was determined not to fail again, though, and set his sights on developing an accessible vehicle for the average person after 2 failed attempts. At the time, having a car was seen as a luxury reserved for the rich. Henry made over 20 design prototypes before settling on one, which he called the Model A, thanks to his forward-thinking approach and talent for luring top talent. He continued to enhance the Model A over the following 5 years, then the Model N. Henry understood the value of working with a single manufacturer to provide the components he needed to construct his cars as a result of his prior failures. In order to do that, he located a machine shop in Detroit. Henry was inspired by the assembly line concept he saw in an abattoir while visiting Chicago and realized that if he could apply it to the production of cars, he could produce more vehicles per day. In 1904, he raised more money, constructed his own facility, hired over 300 people, and began experimenting with the assembly line method. The Model N was the first automobile to use an assembly line in 1906, resulting in a 5-fold increase in production and the best-selling status in the US. Henry established his own manufacturing business in 1907 so that he could create his own engines, transmissions, and other auto parts. In the Model T, one of the most popular automobiles in history, he used this new steel. Henry's goal was to create cars that the average person could use on a daily basis. The Model T was the realization of that fantasy. Despite having a high initial cost of $150, roughly $21,000 in today's money, it quickly established itself as a fan favorite, receiving 15,000 orders within days of going on sale. The Ford Motor Company quickly rose to the top of the automotive industry in America. Henry constructed a new factory in Highland Park, Michigan, in 1910 to meet the Model T's rising demand. Production time was cut from 12 hours to 90 minutes once the assembly line was declared operational in 1913. More than all other automakers combined, the Ford Motor Company produced over 300,000 vehicles in 1914. Every year, Henry increased production of the Model T, and decreased the price of the vehicle to reflect this. In order to reduce high employee turnover among those who found the assembly line tedious, the Model T's price, which had previously been $850, was reduced to less than $400 by 1916. When Henry doubled their pay to $5 per day, he was able to hire mechanics from all over the nation. Other automakers were skeptical of this decision, but it was a success and raised the bar for the sector. Ford Motor Company continues to be a major player in the automotive industry and currently has a market capitalization of about $70 billion. Which of the following facts was your favorite in this video? Let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to turn on the notification bell and subscribe for more.